Hello everyone and welcome to today's meeting. Welcome to the first Environment Committee meeting of this year, and also to all the new faces around the room, both new members to Environment Committee and new councillors. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing a commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. And this is where I get myself into a mess as being all environmentally friendly and having all the papers on electronic only. Okay, so appointment of substitutes. I know that we have one, Councillor Elaine Wilmore for, no, I'm going to have to think.
Yes, Chair, we have Councillor Wilmore for Councillor Scott. Thank you.
Do we have any others?
No, Chair.
Thank you, Margaret. Any declarations of interest?
Yes, myself. I have an interest in item 12.
Okay, remind me what item 12 is.
It's the confidential report into
Okay.
the home upgrade grants.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Do we need to know what that is, or is it just fine to note it?
Does the interest get declared within the confidential item or at this point, Margaret?
Sorry. We can list the DOI and leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
And do we have any public participation?
None, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Which moves us onto the minutes. Clearly there was some of us who were still here at the last meeting. Has anybody got any comments or points of clarification that they want to make on the minutes? We go through, I have to find them. And anything on page 1, page 2, see how many there were, 3, and I doubt there's any on 4. It was a very short meeting, so that's an accurate record of the meeting and we'll sign those off. So that brings us on to item 5, which anyone who was on the committee last year will know this is something very close to my heart, the annual performance report, where I was arguing very strongly about the importance of this. So I presume who we got talking to this?
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to introduce it. So this is the performance scorecard for 23-24, yes? Am I in the right place on the agenda? Yeah, okay. So it is the final scorecard for this year with a whole set of KPIs and actions that the committee has had in view for the year. Pleased to note that all of the actions are in the green or amber, which is a good sign of progress against of those. In terms of the KPIs, there are a number of red ones, but there are detailed commentary against each of those items. So I take them as read and happy then for members to take any questions and explore any of those if they wish to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Committee, making sure that we're not putting officers through opportunities to reread their reports in the committee when we should all have read them in advance. So I think that's a really nice way to start the meeting. People know that I am very passionate about the performance indicators. However, I'm also very aware that we don't want to all still be here at 11 o'clock at night. So I think what we need to do is be using this item as an opportunity to highlight where there are issues, where there are concerns, and where there are areas that we would want to, as the committee, to look at in more detail, and then we can bring that back in more detail at future meetings if there are areas where we want to deep dive into it. Just for your information as well, under any other business, I'm planning to just give you a bit of an update on the forward plan of what is planning to come to committee, and also that I've picked up on all the emails that people have sent in saying the issues that have concerned to me. So if you've sent something in saying this is an issue, we have picked it up and we will pick that up under any other business. So in terms of the performance scorecard, as Shane says, there's detailed explanations on that, but it is an opportunity to review the council's performance and say, are there any areas where we think we want to know more, or where we want to potentially do a deep dive more into understanding these areas? So has anybody got anything? Councillor Cross, then Councillor Udall.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome to your, congratulations on your appointment. And yeah, about the scorecards, I've struggled with them because some of them seem to be perhaps measuring half the story or telling half the story. What I'd like to propose, in the interest of a short meeting, is that we decide upon a small group, say task and finish type style group, to look at the scorecards and how they could be improved to be public facing, more transparent, clearer, and measuring where it helps. Thank you.
Up under the next item, which is about the performance scorecard going forward. So I take that on board, and while I'm a huge advocate of performance scorecards, I've never advocated that we've got it exactly right at the moment. So I think that's absolutely something we need to look at, and perhaps we pick that up under the next item. Councillor Udall.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. Would you like them all at once, or...?
It depends whether how you think it's easier for officers to...
I have got every faith in the officers and given me the fantastic answers, which I know they will. The first question is regarding the Riverside Park improvements. A concern of mine, which has been ongoing for some time, is we could fail potentially in this area, not due to any fault of our own, but due to the fault of others, in the form of water pollution. And the water problem and the cleanliness of our water in Worcester, especially in the River Severn, a lot of the feeder brooks and the feeder rivers, the River Tame, is incredibly problematic. Some of them are actually dead rivers, like the Lawn Brook, where fish are no longer able to swim due to pollution and problems which have occurred in the past. I do wonder whether we need to bring this back to committee at some point in the future to look at the water quality which we have in our waterworks in Worcester, to make sure that that it is something which we can monitor and see what we can do to actually improve it. If I go on to my next question, which is regarding the garden waste collection, I probably have raised this before and I'll probably get the same answers as I did last time. I think this could be dramatically improved if we didn't stop collection in the winter months. And a number of people have actually spoken to me, especially last year when the leaves, autumnal leaves, fell late, that the autumnal leaves were on the ground after the bin collections had ceased, and therefore they had to store them for some considerable time over the winter. I wouldn't say we need to do 2 fortnightly like we do the rest of the year, but a monthly collection would, I think, be appreciated. And the final question which I have is regarding the animal fouling cleared within time, and basically all to do with animal fouling full stop. There is, I believe, a potential need for us to examine the return of a dog warden in Worcester. I know that's a service which is used in other districts, provided by WRS. Maybe it's something which we need to consider how we want to do that here in Worcester, whether there are budgetary allowances to make that possible even, and because obviously that would have consequences on budgets. But what would be the criteria which we would use to determine whether it's something which is necessary for us to return to Worcester in the way it was previously? I hope that's not too much, Chair.
Chair, not entirely sure what those questions are relating to performance, but happy to try and work through them. Water quality, we can bring something back on water quality. However, it's one of those areas which isn't a statutory responsibility of this council. We're a council under pressure from a budgetary point of view, from an officer resource point of view, and I would just remind members of that and sort of the limitations around that. But Councillor Ewell is absolutely right. You know, it does form part of the wider Riverside Park environment, and I'm sure, I'm looking to my right to David and his team. I'm sure, and we can bring something back at some future point. The garden waste point's been raised before, and as Councillor Udall has said, we've provided an answer on that, and at the moment we feel how we provide it is done in the most efficient way. However, if members feel that they want to look at amending the service to extend it for those winter months, again, we can look at that, and we can brief Chair and Vice Chair in the first instance, possibly, and then look to bring something back to committee. Animal fouling, do you want to pick up on the animal fouling point?
With regards to that, we've got the dual role from the civil enforcement officers who undertake not only the enforcement side of it, but the education and then ambassadorial roles. So I think we've got it covered. It is very, very difficult to obviously catch people leaving dog fouling in the act. So it is a bit hit and miss, but I think from an education and enforcement, they're regular in our parks, talking to residents regarding dogs on leads, etc. Down Riverside, where the swans are currently nesting, they do quite a lot of work along there. So I think we've got that covered within existing resources. Councillor Udall.
Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions about the projects, please. With the public bin investment programme, I was wondering specifically which bins are due to be installed still, whether it's parks and other areas which I know have not been done yet. For the ward level biodiversity action plan, I'm wondering whether this is a project that we could actually continue. I'm wondering whether we've exhausted the work that can be done at ward level with councillors and whether this could be something that we could continue. I don't know whether it was part of a huge amount of funding or resource that was a limitation perhaps, but whether that could continue even if it's working with local volunteer groups. Then also with the electrification of the City Council's fleet, I'm really pleased to see that there is work going for the vegetable oil tank installation, and I'm just wondering whether this work will be completed in time for the new vehicles that are coming to the City Council. Thank you.
With regards to the bins, we've got quite a considerable number that we need to install in parks. I think we have got a few that the on-street recycling that we haven't got round to, but I can find out definitely the areas for you, Councillor Wynne, and supply those. With the ward level biodiversity, the idea is not to stop it, even though it may no longer be a project within committee, and we can still continue to report on that on a quarterly or annual basis, but it's around more working now with local residents, community groups, friends of, to try and get them doing a lot of the work that we've started and worked with local ward members as well. With regards to the tank, we have hit a few issues with that, but we're still looking to try and progress that. But we've also got the work that Ruth and David are doing around the electrification of the fleet and that feasibility study, so that will form part of that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to talk about the percentage of household waste recycled. It's page 12 at the top, 6 at the bottom. I wondered if I could find out more about what the council's plan is to reduce contamination of recycling, please. I see it throughout bins in my ward, plastic bags, and various things that cannot be recycled, and I'm concerned that that could impact the contamination of the whole truck. So I would like to find out what steps can be done to minimise contamination, please. Thank you.
Chair, I think that's probably something that does need to feature as a future report for this committee. I think for some time now, committee have raised concerns around recycling rates, and certainly some of the evidence we've seen when we visited facilities like Norton. And the numbers we've seen has proven the point there. So we can talk about sort of generic things this evening, but I think what members would probably prefer is a localised report on what we can do in conjunction with the County Council around messaging, around comms, around perhaps some street level interventions as well. But I think I said at a previous committee a couple of weeks ago that until we find out what the blockages are to people recycling, or what the blockages are, that's leading to people putting the wrong thing in the right bin, then we have to tailor whatever we do around that. So until we understand that first, that to me is the key. So there's a piece of engagement work there as well that we need to undertake.
To say that Karen and I have already had a discussion about that. It was one of the issues that have been raised when we talk. I mean, it might have even been you, when people emailed back in the issues that they wanted to have the committee looking at. The improving levels of recycling and the contamination issue is one that we really need to pick up on. So when we come to any other business, it's one of the ones I've got listed as an area to do a deep dive into. What we haven't done yet, because Karen and I haven't had the time to sit down with officers and think about it, is work out where in the committee cycle that needs to fit, just to make sure that it's not left too long, but it's also enough time for officers to fit in doing that piece of work to make sure it's meaningful. Certainly in the initial conversations we've had is that the issues of recycling that you encounter in your ward, because it's the same ward as Karen's, are very different to the ones that although it's actually quite close proximity to the ones that I encounter in my ward. So that's where we thought elected members can have a really important role in getting those messages, those very localised messages out, to make sure that we really do tackle that issue. Okay. Did you have any others? If not, we'll go to Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would welcome the suggestion of garden waste bins being trialled in winter. I think it's a fantastic idea. And if it was trialled and it turned out to be not cost effective, then we can soon sort that out. But I think it would be, and I certainly think it's worth trialling. My second point is, when I visited Norton to look at the recycling issue earlier this year, it's not necessarily that it's the wrong stuff being put in the bin. Sometimes it's the right stuff being put in the wrong way. So the cardboard is too big, or the stuff is put in a bag and they don't want to empty bags. So what could be appropriate stuff is just thrown away because no one's going to empty the bag, and people don't understand that. My question is really, I couldn't work out where the education aspect of it came, or where the onus lay. Was it with county, or was it with city, or was it with county and city? Nobody seemed to be very clear when I was talking to the lady at Norton as to whose responsibility that was. So as city councillors, we took it on personally, and I was fascinated by the number of people who said, I never realised that. I thought everything could be put in a bag. Or I thought shredded paper could be put in loose, or I thought it's okay, it's recycling, so wood is fine or metal is fine. There's a massive education issue, and I'm not quite sure whether it's county, city, or a combination.
Thanks, Councillor Rudge, thank you. I think the answer is it lies in both organisations. So the County Council are the Strategic Waste Authority, who have responsibility for disposal. So it's in their interest that waste is reduced and recycling is increased. But there's also interest for us in doing it as well. So it doesn't sit within one organisation. It's a joint responsibility.
Councillor Wilmore.
Thanks, Chair. I know that surveys are fairly blunt instrument tools, but I'm just looking at the satisfaction with the cemeteries and crematorium. And I know that the data across the indicators is quite different. Some of it is quite objective and numerical, whereas some of it is looking at satisfaction. And because we are quite far behind our target for this, and given that the crematorium is one of our big investments in the upcoming year, is there any sense of why there's so much dissatisfaction? Is there, a period in people's lives where they're, very vulnerable and, upset? Is that, it would just be it's a horrible thought to think that we're not serving their needs at that time. Is there ever any work that goes on to sort of have a bit more in-depth information rather than just the satisfaction score?
Again, thanks, Councillor Wilmore. I'd like to reassure members, really, because I think a lot of what we see come across our desks is all very positive about the service, and I'm sure you as members, whether it be through sort of personal visits or through hearsay, have also picked up on that. I don't know the actual numbers that we're talking about there in terms of, you know, a return. You know, whether or not there's something, you know, it's a low number that's been sort of distorted by a couple of residents or users that are unhappy about something, but that's not reflective of what we see and what we hear as part of that service, day in and day out. But again, we can deep dive that into a bit further and provide some further information to members on it. As Shane was going.
I was just going to build on that and say I think this builds on the point that Councillor Cross was making about some of these might be the right performance indicators, but maybe they're not the right measures, because I think this is potentially, it's the annual survey, and if it's the annual survey of the whole city, it's not actually the survey of the people who are mostly using the crematoriums. Having recently used a crematorium in another area, we were discussing, is it appropriate? It might be appropriate to have some way of people feeding back. I know from, as I came out of that funeral on a very personal level, because they'd done it so well, I would have loved the opportunity to say, actually, thank you, it really made a difference. And maybe we need to be collecting feedback in a different way to give us that fair feedback rather than through an annual survey. But it does come back to the point that Councillor Cross was making, that maybe we need to review some of our indicators about are they the right ones that we've got and are they the right measure? Because the whole point of this item is to make sure that we as councillors are aware of how good our services are. And if we've got data that actually is giving us a skewed version of that, that's not going to be helpful. So that's something we need to look at.
Through you, Chair, now I was simply going to make the same point. These are data from the annual survey, so they're not necessarily users of the service who are responding. So it's giving a misleading picture in that sense.
Potentially, as a lot of councillors will know, the thing that you get a complaint from residents about crematoriums is they've walked through and the grass has been overgrown, and that's what they're complaining about, so it might just be a reflection of that. So I think potentially we write that one as something to come back to. Does anybody else have any other issues related to item 5? I think we've sort of strayed into item 6 as a very related item going forward. So are we happy to move on to that? Councillor Sadiq.
Just on your take, thank you. First of all, congratulations for taking position. In our ward, we have a problem, issues, street cleaning and dog pulling and litter pick issues here. Especially, sadly, in Fort Royal area, used to be a litter pick man here. His name John, and sadly, I don't know why he's going to move from there, and still vote people here wanted back litter pick person permanently. Which one is doing back to a vote? It's a back in good environment, and that's all we need from Fort Royal area.
Yeah, I think Councillor Riaz has also raised that concern. So we're going to do a walk around, and I've asked Gareth to look at what's changed with the rotas that operative has moved from the area, because we're not aware that he has, so we're not 100% sure. So I need to look into it, and I'll feed back to you away from the committee, if that's okay.
Again, that was another issue that came up more widely in feedback, was looking at street cleansing, litter, graffiti and those sorts of issues. So that potentially, well, hopefully you'll get an answer about that very specific issues a lot quicker than that. It's something that we need to just maybe have a look into at some point in the year. Okay, is everybody happy then to move on to item 6? Did officers want to say anything more about item 6, since we've sort of strayed into that discussion anyway? I mean, I don't know whether you want to say.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, just to introduce it really in terms of this is a development, a continuation of the discussion we were having in the last municipal year about revising our approach to performance management, trying to make the indicators more relevant and more aligned with what each of the committees wants to focus on. So in terms of the approach we're now looking to adopt is to move clearer in terms of having the projects on the one hand and having indicators which are quarterly indicators which will provide up-to-date information, and tried as far as possible to support those projects and activities. And then for the annual ones, rather than just simply repeating those figures quarter by quarter, have an annual report which takes the findings and then says a little bit more about what we're going to do about them, rather than just simply showing the results. So that's the plan. The indicators are largely the same as before that have been carried forward, so welcome a discussion about what changes there might be there. But just in terms of the projects and activities, we just had a discussion about the green flag issue. So the idea there is to keeping the green flag for the Riverside Park, that sort of work has largely been complete. So that's more about going forward in terms of how how we maintain our parks and make them the places that we want them to be and keep them that way. And the other one that we've just been talking about is the biodiversity ward level work. So what we will need to develop during 24-25 is a biodiversity strategy. So that will then drive a set of actions and make that kind of shaped less of a reaction to an idea which was there before and something clearer about what the committee wants to set direction. The other ones which are proposed as new for 24-25, we've agreed previously the heat network study. So that's an important piece of work that we'll be doing. We recognise that flooding is becoming increasingly a problem for us, and there's been a lot of that in the news, particularly around the cricket club and so on. So we certainly need to develop during the course of this year a flooding strategy. We know that domestic food waste collection is a big part of the agenda for the coming year, and we have previously agreed to undertake this depot electrification and feasibility work. So all of those will form part of the programme for the committee next year. In terms of the indicators, one that's new is the recycling contamination rate, which we've just been talking about. Well, that's an off-log indicator, so we want to be sure we're on top of that. And the only one that's sort of being adjusted, really, than being removed, is right towards the end on page 39 there. Environmental FBNs, penalty notices issued. So not just littering and dog fouling, but extending that to all environmental issues that have been taken up. So it's not being removed, it's just being broadened a little bit. Other than that, as I say, the annual ones will look to do an annual report, not necessarily all at the same time, but as those indicators become relevant rather than simply repeating the indicators. So that's the approach. We're adopting the same approach across all the committees. I'm very interested in any feedback and how we might do things differently. It's an ongoing approach. It's always going to be under review, but that's the proposed set of indicators so far for the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cross has already made a suggestion about having a small working group to look at these in a bit more detail. I don't know whether people have particular views on that and whether people have any other comments that they want to make on this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we have discussed that some of these more detailed on how we're measuring stuff needs to be looked at, particularly things such as dissatisfaction with grass cutting and other things like that in the street scene, going back and looking at what we are measuring and why and what for, because it's also, are we measuring things unnecessarily and creating work for ourselves, which actually then doesn't, if we're getting the same answer all the time, we're not seeing improvement, what is the purpose? But one of the things that I find quite amusing is that I can see it's really good that we've got obviously the overall kilogram for garden waste collection, but we always see a graph that goes down throughout the year. We know this. We know people don't cut their lawns in autumn and winter, yet we have a bar target that's level. And we're setting ourselves up for a fall, and this is a typical target which needs, I think, looking at, because obviously we get a red on a target which actually, well, in Q4 we're never going to get a green, are we? You know, it's those kind of details really that I think it's really important for us to look at to make sure that we're being extremely robust in what we're doing. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the annual KPIs on page 40, it would appear that we're dropping some of our targets, 24-25, as in like the satisfaction of the crematoriums, it's going from 75 to 60. Is that we're actually lowering our target that we're aiming for, or am I misreading the figures?
Through you, Chair, yes, the proposal is to lower the target, primarily because we're expecting the work to take place during 24-25 and the refurbishment, so inevitably that's going to have an impact on customers' satisfaction with the service. So I think that's about setting a more realistic target of what's achievable within that context.
Clearly refining, it's not an irony, refining things by committee isn't going to work, but refining things by a committee of this size probably isn't going to work, and we'd probably be here all night. But I do think, as Councillor Lewing and Councillor Cross have both said, there's potential opportunity to do some work to refine these. Councillor Lewing and myself are quite happy to do that as Chair and Vice Chair. Do we have any volunteers? I guess Councillor Cross is volunteering himself to be part of that. And Councillor Rudge. So we've got some volunteers. Councillor Lewing is suggesting that what we'll do is we'll pull together a small working group of people who are interested in being part of that. I think, Margaret, have you just noted down the volunteers so you know who has said, who's indicated they'd be willing to be part of that? And we'll try and do some work to refine some of those with officers understanding the practicalities of what, and hopefully actually it will help you in that we'll get some measures that reflect some of the good work that you do rather than things that reflect negatively. But again, we need to be mindful of the work that we're giving to officers to do that. I can see Lloyd's itching to say something.
I suppose I'm just seeking clarity, Chair. We've got a scorecard in front of members tonight for approval. Are we saying the working group will look to refine the projects and the KPIs on this scorecard, or are we saying that the actual KPIs are up for grabs, if that makes sense? What is it the group is seeking to do? Are they seeking to refine the KPIs that are on this proposed scorecard, or are they looking to introduce or consider new KPIs or different KPIs? I think we could probably just do with some clarity on that.
My understanding and Councillor Lewing's that we are looking to refine it. If others have another view, I think this is the opportunity to say that now.
Yes, agree. So we have the right broad indicators, just sometimes our numbers just need a bit of a rethink.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's also about what the narrative is as well, because if it's a good narrative, then it helps us all understand, and perhaps we don't need so many questions. So I think it's what we're asking, what we would like that to be, and I think that's really important. Thank you.
So what I think we're doing is we've considered the proposed content. We're agreeing that these are the things that we are happy with, but we're delegating to a smaller group of volunteers to look at refining them, both in terms of actually how things are measured, but also supporting officers in how the narrative is then presented back to members, which should hopefully save a lot of time and have clarity going forward. Is everybody happy with that? Seeing nods around the room. This is when you're going to have to tell me how to pronounce your name.
Yeah, Subject. Paul Subject.
Councillor
Yeah.
Subject.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just trying to interpret what you've just said. If we're refining the target, the definitions or the quarterly KPI, then we are changing it. I believe what we're saying is that some of them aren't quite measuring the same thing. So if the right thing. So, for example, the collections of overflowing litter bins, I think it's more poignant to actually be recording how many complaints there are about overflowing litter bins. So we've got a number, whatever that number is, rather than how quickly the council are able to respond to that complaint. I think both things are important, but I think when you've got a bit of an ongoing problem which we have had with litter bins for operational reasons, which I think is now resolved. But I think it's more interesting to have a precise number there. And I think there are several of these KPIs that are quite similar. Percentage of poor grass maintenance cleared within time, rather than the number of complaints about it. So I think it's not just a matter of kind of refining the dialogue around the interpretation of the result. Actually, the KPI needs changing, not fundamentally around the service, but it needs a different definition, in my view, Chair.
Again, Chair, that's probably within scope, isn't it? I suppose the risk is we've built up a data set of information leading up to this point. If we're then going to change in what we're reporting, that sort of data set becomes obsolete and we're starting again. So that's the only risk I would present. I think what Councillor Subject has conveyed is in keeping with the principle of the KPI. So no issues there, but it will mean that we'll start recording and reporting something new. So that trend in some ways could be lost.
But conversely, if it's not actually the best measure, we don't want to carry on measuring something that isn't the best measure going forward. So I think what we've got to the agreement, I'm going to ask Councillor Cooper to come in before I try and summarise, because he might change it.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. I was going to quickly say that now is the time to do it rather than halfway through the year. At the start of the municipal year, it makes sense to do this now. Thank you.
So what I think we've concluded is that you will carry on measuring what these are roughly the right things, and everybody's agreed this is the right things on the scorecard. It needs to be potentially refined, and some of the measures might need to be refined as well. However, that may take a short time. It's a timely time to do it now. So I think the steer to officers is continue with what you're doing. We'll have a smaller group of members scrutinising those, and then we will develop for those where they do change and in an evolutionary process, so that it's clear to you what we're doing. So you don't stop, you just continue, and then as we put things on, we'll move it forward, and we'll report that regularly back to this committee so that all members are involved with how it evolves. It is timely to do it at the start, but it may take a little bit of time. But what we will end up with is a more robust scorecard that hopefully we can manage and understand more of the core work going forward.
Just assuming that the small working group which you've discussed will report back to this committee before any final decisions are made, because obviously this is the committee with decision-making powers.
I think that's what we just said, that we will report back to the meeting. Given that we're not meeting again till, and we're meeting in July, so actually we can do the work between now and July. I'm just thinking if there's a longer timescale. So yes, we'll make sure that any new proposals come forward to the July meeting, and we'll put that forward on the forward plan for July. So you can have your say without being on the working group. Okay, are we happy? Are we happy to move on? Okay, so moving on, our next item on the agenda is domestic waste and recycling collections.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully everyone has read the report and also seen the subsequent press release, and will have noted that the date has changed from the week commencing the 22nd of July that is in the report to week commencing now the 29th of July. The main reason for this is, as Lloyd mentioned earlier, we work quite closely with Counter in partnership from a waste disposal and collection point of view. So we're proposing a revised date that will better manage the flow of recyclables and waste through County Council sorting and treatment facilities. So that's the main reason that we've actually pushed this back by a week. We haven't yet communicated with residents, so they will get the correct date through any mail shots that we do, bin tags, etc., as part of the plan. The rationalisation for this is around the crews currently working in small numbers haven't got that resilience to help out and assist where we've got large collection rounds and having to go back and tip off, and it's not the most efficient way of collecting the domestic waste. So we've done quite a lot of work around this, and one of the reasons for stalling this was around the simpler recycling that was coming in and also the food waste. But now we've got some clear indication from central government on the dates. We feel that this is the opportune time now to introduce the changes. All areas will be impacted in some way, and we are putting our members briefing out hopefully this week, if not next week, so that members that are not part of this committee will be aware of the changes that are coming forward on the 29th of July. We'll also be doing some additional work around our comms, making sure that the right messages go out to the right households, and we'll also be continuing social media messages that will start this month and continue all the way through to August. And we've also got a resilient crew that will be following up anybody that does put out the wrong bin. We're hoping that we've got quite a few of our bin influencers out there that put the right bin out at the right time, so people know what bin to go out. But if people miss, we'll obviously tag and we'll come and do a bit of a mop-up session. I think that really is the key points that I want to raise, unless anybody's got any questions.
I don't know who was first. I'm going to go for Councillor Cooper, Councillor Lawrence, and then Councillor Liudel.
Thank you, Chair. There is a way of looking on the website to be able to see when you type in your postcode, which is your bin date. I'm just checking that that will be included in this, because it's a really good little way, if you forget, you can see what's happening. Thank you.
Yeah, the lookup will be changed as well so that people can tap into the postcode and see when the changes are going to be implemented. So that's underway with our IT as we speak.
Thank you, Chair. Will you be using social media? Like, there's lots of informal Facebook groups and a lot of people follow those. And my other question is that a lot of people have been cleaning facilities. Do those companies, are they aware? Do you know? Because that's going to throw their schedule. And I don't know if they'll have actually been aware of it. They may, I mean, they don't always come from Worcester City.
That isn't something that we have included as part of our comms because we feel that residents are the most important people within this change, and we would hope that they maybe would speak with the companies who are doing the cleaning. But we will be using social media. That is part of the comms strategy that we're going to deploy, as well as obviously mail shots, etc.
I think there's a few services out there and it might be a good idea to get in touch with them.
Councillor Udall.
Chair, I probably may not be unique, but I can never remember 1 week to the next which bin it is, which is to go out. And everybody on my road relies on my 90-year-old neighbour who puts out the bin first, and we all follow suit. And hopefully she's got it right. She normally does. The consequences for this, I think, are serious for the city, because somebody once told me when I was first elected all those years ago, don't mess with people's bins unless you want lots of inquiries and problems, because it's the one service everybody in the city receives on a weekly basis. I am concerned that we're doing this in the school summer holidays, when people are going to be away. People are going to be asking neighbours and others to put out their bins for them. Some bins will not be put out at all because of people being away. I'm just concerned this is going to create, because of the timing involved, almighty levels of confusion, which is then going to create an almighty level of resentment and anger towards the local authority, not because of anything we've done, but because of the timing which we've done it. I would think that the better timing would be when people are going back to school in September, when people are looking out for change and are automatically changing things, whether this is perhaps too soon and maybe the wrong time to do it. I stand corrected if you've already thought about this and have concluded that I'm being silly, but I am just concerned that people are going to be away, and the last thing they're going to be thinking about is what bins they're going to be putting out and when.
Councillor Udall, I would never refer to you as silly.
You're the only one who wouldn't.
We have thought long and hard about the timing of this, and there is no, I think, optimum time that you could choose. You know, if we leave it later in the year, it becomes dark nights and people can't see the bin influencers out there putting the right bin out. We've got a big resilience crew that's going to be following up, so we're quite confident that we will manage to hit everybody who will get that information. They're getting a new calendar to give them the information. I think there's going to be a lot of that comms going on that I think will prevent that. And I think some of the social media posts I've seen so far on the back of the press release has been quite complimentary of his changing and the reasons why, the rationale from an efficiency point of view with a council that is obviously suffering financial hardship. So I think we've probably hit it right. I don't think there's any time probably would be a good time, and we are going to have to start looking at food waste. So I think now is the optimum time to push this through. Councillor Udall. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Anybody else wants to say anything? Councillor Sadiq.
Please, can you do in the message in different language as well as spread in social media, because some people can't understand, especially European learning thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll start that. Thank you.
Councillor Rudge.
It's a related point, really, but I've spoken to a number of residents who are concerned that the green bin lids sometimes come off when they're chucked into the lorry. I think maybe it's just the momentum or whatever, but then trying to get them replaced seems, in one case, 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something. And so the bins are out, they've got nowhere to store it that's dry, and the stuff that they're putting in is obviously getting wet. I just wondered if there's any capacity in this new system for the recycling, on the recycling days. Could we possibly speed up the kind of mending of broken bins?
Yeah.
Kevin, you might want to introduce yourself. So
Yeah,
not
I'm
everyone
Kevin
will
Hayes,
know.
Waste and Recycling Manager. At the minute, we've got a bin replacement programme, which we've had a few issues with through stocks of bins, because everybody's seemed to be ordering bins at the same time because of the food waste coming on. But we have got on top of that now, so hopefully within 14 days, bins will have a good turnaround. We've also got in-cab tech, which is bins reported in real time by the crew, which comes into the back office so we can just pick them up as and when they come in, so we can go out and deliver bins as soon as we get the bins come in. So it's like in real time. So it's one of Mr. Oodle's comments was about the bins and having that resource following up. We've also got the in-cab tech, so when we have a bin that's not presented, it's then fed to the back office system, and then we can redeploy on that basis. So if there's a street or a number of bins in that street, we can deploy where it's needed. So it's the same with the bin. So as soon as we have a bin that needs replacing, it comes in real time, and we can feed that out to the team that has to deliver them. So it should reduce the time, the wait for customers. Okay.
So anybody else got any other comments on this item? If not, is everybody happy to note the content of this report and note the comms that will be going out? I think the important thing as members also is to note the change of date from what was in the press release and in the committee papers. Sandra's team have picked up on that, but I think it is really important that that gets picked out, and we all, if we're going to do it on one date, we all need to consistently be putting out that message, and as councillors there's a responsibility for us to be getting that messages out to members in our wards. So if everybody's happy to note that, I'm happy to. We're going to be moving on to the next item, which is item 8, the progress update on the Environmental Sustainability Strategy Action Plan, and we're going to Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. For those of you who perhaps don't know me, I'm Ruth Corrals, I'm Sustainability Team Leader. This is our twice yearly report to this committee on the progress that we're making to deliver our Environmental Sustainability Strategy Action Plan. This is the second action plan that we've had under the strategy, the first one being completed a couple of years ago. And we are making good progress on completion of this action plan. I won't take you through everything, but I would just like to pick up on a few highlights, if that's okay. We've had particular progress on a number of themes, and the report is structured according to the themes that are in the sustainability strategy. So a few things that have happened that members may or may not be aware of is we've had the funding enabling the council to go forward with the plan to install electric cremators. The crematorium currently accounts for around 18% of the council's carbon footprint. So in terms of our efforts to work towards a carbon neutral city council, electric cremators is a really big step forward. So that's been very positive to get the money to enable that work to go ahead. We've also been fortunate in receiving funding through the Swimming Pool Support Fund that Sport England ran, enabling us to install solar panels at Purdyswell Leisure Centre. So again, that's a really good contribution towards our carbon footprint reductions. There is also helping with working towards carbon neutrality as a city, funding for Lower Wick Swimming Pool to also install solar panels. They had to bid through us, so because we were putting in a bid with Purdyswell, that was facilitated, so that's really good. Also, just pick up on, members may be aware there's a lighting upgrade in St Martin's Gate that's been happening over the last few weeks. So if you've parked in there recently, you may notice that there's now motion sensors. So that's been really successful to reduce unnecessary use of lighting in that building. So obviously still maintaining the light when people are there, because if you're moving around, then the lights are on. working, and this is a sort of longer term plan, but to reduce emissions from our fleet. It was mentioned earlier that we've got the funding, and this was a report to this committee earlier in the year. We did secure the funding for a study looking at the electrification of the depot. So that's the first kind of step really, for us to be able to take significant steps forward with electrifying our fleet. We have a few electric vehicles at the moment, but to do any more, we need more chargers, and that comes with various different kind of issues in terms of upgrading the electricity at that site. So that money will enable us to provide a full kind of cost and feasibility of that work. So that's really good. Just moving on to look at what else we're doing with the city in terms of carbon reduction. Hopefully members will be aware that we've got our bike share scheme due to launch very soon. So we are hoping that will transform transport around the city, enabling people to pick up a bike, hire it for a few minutes, travel to their destination and off-hire it again in a bay. So yes, we are looking forward to that coming to the city, and as I say, that should replace a number of journeys that would have otherwise been taken by car. Finally, I think the last thing I'd just like to highlight is under our natural environment theme. Pleased to report that after the support for from this committee, in terms of using some of the enabling reserve, we've been successful in recruiting a biodiversity officer. So Tim started with us a couple of weeks ago, and is doing great work already to meet with people around the city, and wider as well, to ensure he has a good understanding of both biodiversity currently and what issues we have. And the sort of initial task, alongside working with our planning service on the biodiversity net gain work, is for Tim to develop a biodiversity strategy, and that will sit under the environmental sustainability strategy, but as a very distinct strategy to look at what we are doing on our own land with biodiversity, but also how we can work with partners and as an influencer in the city. Okay, I think that's all I'd like to highlight. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much to Ruth. You will have noticed that I actually briefed officers in advance of this to keep their reports brief and not literally read everything they do. There is a lot more detail in Ruth's report that I'm sure you've all read. So thank you, Ruth, and thank you for all the work that you've done, the team, and Ruth and David in the last year, doing an awful lot of work to put in these funding bids. Even just the thing of practically getting the funding bids in has been a real nightmare and a huge achievement. So this is then the opportunity to ask questions. I've got Councillor Lewin first, then Councillor Cross, then Councillor Cooper, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to reiterate what you've said. I think, you know, as a sustainability team, it's only a few officers, but the impact that you make is out of proportion to the hours that you put in. You know, if you look at the total funding for these schemes that you've brought into the City Council, we wouldn't have been able to do half these projects without it. And some of them, particularly things like the electric commuters, you know, that's 18% of the carbon for the city. It's a huge impact. So thank you very much. And going forward, I really hope that we maintain the level of officers that we need to be able to apply for these funding bids. Actually, I'd like it that we have more notice for the funding bids as well. Sometimes I know that officers hear about it, you know, pretty much a few weeks before they have to put the detail they're working on. And also, you know, we are a council where we are under huge budgetary pressure. And if we do not have funding for things like this, then we will not meet our net zero targets. And that is very clear, that the funding has to be there from government to be able to achieve our targets. So I hope that that will be forthcoming in the future as well. Thank you for the update on all the particular reports. I have been obviously involved in in all of them. I'm really looking forward to progress on some of the bigger things, particularly, you know, the heat network. I know that that's at the very early stages. We were a key partner in that piece of work. The City Council, we had to lead it. We had to put the money in, otherwise it would have fallen apart. So, and that's the way that our sustainability money is being used to start these really important projects. That is what that pot is for, to add extra value to the City Council's work. So just a huge thank you, and I wish you absolute best of luck with the Beryl Bike Scheme. I know it's been quite tough the past few weeks. You've been extremely busy, but I'm really looking forward to seeing these electric bikes around the city, and hopefully people choosing to use them, you know, for all sorts of reasons. So thank you.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, I'd echo those words, absolutely. I think it's always brave to take on new steps. I'm concerned that we have a long way to go still in terms of changing driver behaviour towards more vulnerable road users, including cyclists. I mean, yes, having the bikes is brilliant, that'll help with the hills, but it's the nut behind the wheel that's the most dangerous part of a vehicle, as people say, and that's true in terms of the drivers. I mean, thankfully I don't get very many close passes, touch wood, but when you do, you know, it really has an impact, more than what the person who's just driven past may think. So anything we can do in terms of comms would be great. I know a lot of this is to do with county, and we're doing what we can, those of us at county who are minded to improve things there. So use us in whichever way we can, those of us who are supportive towards active travel at county, in more than just words, but in deeds. I'd love to see more about our ponds and waterways. I know that we got a Zola invasive weed at Lippard Ponds, Special Area of Conservation. I mean, obviously I'm being parochial here because this is within the parish, but I know also Ofton Lane Ponds, there's been a long-standing issue. Maybe it's to do with county as well, or highways or natural England, or silt traps. But you know, love to engage more with that, and if we can help get residents more on board as well, that'd be fantastic. I know a number of local people are involved with that already. So having all of us working together, I think would be brilliant. And I'd love to see copies of those reports, please. Thank you.
So just to pick up on the waterways, absolutely we can share, because we did have the consultants report. We haven't yet brought it formally to this committee because we are still working out what our kind of initial projects can be on that, and that does come down to resourcing and other funding. But yes, absolutely, you know, we are aware that there's a particular problem, particularly at the moment with Lippard Ponds and Ofton Lane, as you mentioned. So yes, I'm aware there's kind of discussions going on with those. Thank you.
And again, that's something that we can look at when Karen and I sit down and look at the forward plan that we can build into that. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report. It's so nice and clearly laid out. Thank you for your work. I'm particularly pleased to see Grey Fleet mentioned. I don't think that was mentioned last year. This time last year, I asked a question about EV coach charging, and I was told that some thought would be put into that. So if I can just remind you again, I'd really appreciate that. And I wondered if there was any comms going out about Clean Air Day, which is this June. I think it's the 20th. Thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I did hear today that a decision's been made that there won't be any comms, and this is county-wide, any comms around Clean Air Day. So yeah, looking at Adrian, because of the general election. So because we're in pre-election period, decision's been taken that there won't be comms for Clean Air Day this year.
Councillor Cooper.
I think that's really disappointing. I think this is something has been brought to many committees. It's a clear problem for Worcester, and I'm sad that is the case. Thank you.
Chair, I'm not aware we've had an internal conversation about that within the city. So what I will do, I will pick up Councillor Cooper's points. I'm sure all members would want me to take that back, and we will discuss that ASAP tomorrow to make sure that we as a district have considered that and considered our own position. But I would like to think that we would look favourably upon doing something, because this isn't political. This is a matter of public health and air quality.
can I just, okay, I was going to say, Councillor Udall.
It's not on this subject, but it's on another item if you want to carry on this.
Let's just, so just picking up on this, is this, I think you're right, it's not a party political issue, it's something that we all think is important. Is there cross-party consensus in the room to say that we, as an Environment Committee, would be wanting to do that, just because I think it empowers Lloyd when they're having officer conversations to be saying it's not party political, it's, yeah, I mean, everybody's nodding in the room. Councillor Cooper.
So just to come back on that, it's not party political at all. Worcester is an air quality management area. We know this, we've seen the reports. This is not up for debate, this is fact, this is proven. We need to be doing more. And, you know, the Beryl bikes be coming in. This is a really nice way of introducing it, perhaps to people that hadn't thought about it for that reason. So I would strongly support comms doing more about Clean Air Day. Thank you.
So I think that's a very clear mandate for you as an officer from all political parties to be going ahead and doing that on a non-political basis this side of the election, clearly with officers leading to ensure that. Councillor Udall, did you want to come back on whatever issue it was?
Yeah, two small issues really. First of all, I'm very pleased about the work at the Worcester Citizens Swimming Pool at Lower Wick. It's the pool where I learned to swim. If I jump in the water now, the water will leave, so that's a different problem. I do wonder if there is any opportunity there to trust to see if there's anything else which we can a growing lot of goodwill there after this has happened, especially if we can then promote the pool as well by having taken part. Other issue, Hannah's just raised about coach EV charging. A complaint which I'm beginning to receive a lot about is people who are working for public utilities and have to have a van at home. I'm thinking, you know, people like AA, RAC, maybe, even Sky Television, and maybe housing associations, British Waterways, all the rest. They're transferring their fleet to electric vehicles, but they can't get into any of our car parks to recharge because of a height barrier, which is stopping them from actually using the facilities. Now, that is an issue which has been reported to me now 3 times by residents who all happen to be Sky Television aerial fitters, which I never watch Sky. But it is an issue that they're being forced, rightly, to have new vans, which are electrically charged, but they can't charge them anywhere in the city because of height barriers. Is that something which we can examine and look at to see if we can actually help them?
Yeah, I'll pick that one up, Councillor. A really good point. I think the positioning of the EV charging in our car parks has largely been down to the topography and the position of the infrastructure and the utilities. So sometimes that might be quite difficult if we're going to maintain the security of the car parks, but where we can look to design something in that is a small section of the car park that's accessible, I think that's a really good point, and probably something that's going to grow in the future. It says in the report we've just completed the second of the EV charging, so King Street's been online for a while. Tower Hill's now in, just needs to have the switch flicked on the national grid, and then we'll start to look wider than that, but those will be subject to business cases and hopefully the availability of grant funding to support it, which was quite crucial to the business cases that we brought to you on St Martin's Gate, King Street and Tower Hill.
I might also say the facility on the riverside at the university campus is absolutely brilliant, but never used. I do think it needs to have a lot more publicity that it's there, because St John's residents in particular have no idea it exists.
Councillor Rudge.
I was going to say, during my 5 years, we've worked with the Lower Wick Pool. We certainly worked with them during COVID, support them through that period. We've obviously had a couple of grant applications that have benefited them well. So there are relationships in place. It probably comes back to some stakeholder management as well, and just keeping in touch and seeing how. But we can pick that point up, Chair, and take that back.
Councillor Rudge.
Forgive me if I'm being a little bit slow here, Chair, but item 9, where 9.4, the work of the new Green Spaces Manager Can I just clarify, is that different from the biodiversity officer? Those are two different people, and they're both new, are they?
Yeah, apologies, that wasn't very clear. Yes, the Green Spaces manager is Doug Henderson, who is also the crematorium manager. The new biodiversity officer is sat in my team, the sustainability team, and that's Tim Whitaker.
Some of it being a result of existing staff moving around into new roles. Did anybody else have any other points they wanted to make on this item? And so is everybody happy to, oh, sorry, Councillor Sadiq.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to say thank you, officers, for the update and your hard work. And especially thank you for EV charges in King Street and Tolo Hill. It's a great opportunity for local residents and the city. It's bringing a great environment for city. Thank you very much for. Thank you, Chair.
They were Atif has saved me doing the thank yous for you, so I think that everybody's I think it is a case of very good work, and everybody's very happy with the work that you're doing and the impact you're having on such a small team. So if everybody's happy to note that report, and we look forward to seeing you on the forward plan when you come back to more, but no doubt we'll see you before then with hopefully some new grant funding streams from government where they'll give you 2 weeks notice and you'll need to turn them around. As Councillor Lewin says, we'd like them to give you more notice, but we're not going to change them, are we? Well, we might change the government, but whether we'll change the way that they operate, that be a different thing. Okay, so moving on to item 9, the draft air quality action plan, and we have Adrian from Worcester Regulatory Services here to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. The item of the draft air quality action plan is before you. It is, as you'll see from the appendix, is a very weighty document, and it comes, in terms of a brief history, it comes from the citywide declaration of an air quality management area in 2019, following 9 hotspot areas being identified in 2018 that led to that political wide declaration. And the Environment Act 1995, as amended, requires us to produce, as a city, an air quality action plan. Essentially, with COVID in the interim, just try and start that off, we've, since post-COVID, had enforcement from DEFRA to say, you really need to do this, and that is why it's presented with you this evening. In terms of the mechanics of how we came about this process, it is laid out in the report, but in brief, a steering group of professionals from WRS, from the City Council, from the County Council, came together to meet regularly and consider in 4 separate topic areas, as well as together the contents of the document. The measures are the main focus of that in terms of what it looks like. There is no funding in and of itself for the document of itself. The measures are funded from the individual measures themselves. Some of them are strategies, some of them are very specific measures. And in terms of the process, we're on quite a tight timescale to get the final document to DEFRA by December. This is your first opportunity as a committee, following the Licensing and Environment Committee 2 weeks ago, to consider this draft document, and I appreciate some of you may have seen this a number of times since and before that date. To let you know, since the Environment and Licensing Committee, there have been a few minor changes to the document, including the summary of the measures have been put in the summary near the beginning, so it's on page, I think it's page 7 if you're looking electronically, or I4 near the beginning. There's also been a change to the wording throughout the document, so rather than saying advisory signage, it now says directional signage. And we've also put the sensors, which are part of a kind of a strategy measure. Indeed, that is what it is. It will live through the predominant period of this action plan, and hopefully with funding for a little bit longer as well, because they're important. So in terms of all I'm asking you to do really is to consider the report in front of you, approve it for a public consultation exercise which will happen or has to happen by July this year, and then also submission to DEFRA as a draft document for official consideration by DEFRA, and feedback from them. Effectively, they mark our homework as well as the general public. And then what this will do, this report, then once it's gone through that 3-month consultation, we'll come back to the committee phases here for the final version of itself, and once we've gone through the DEFRA and public exercise. So it'll come back again in about November time before it goes to DEFRA for final, and in a sense put it in. And as I said at the last committee, it's not a standalone document at that point in time. It is a document we would hope to, the measures would be updated as per the life of the document. So we see the measures in particular being live in what they are. Some of them are obviously quite soon, some of them are a bit more long term. Indeed, some of the measures which we've discounted as future measures may come into play through various things. So just to bear that in mind, the appendices is quite weighty because of some of the measures and the considerations are not yet into play, but you never know, they might come into play in the near future. So, and I think some of the questions that I've had before, and maybe today, you might look at that. That's how they'll come about. So hopefully I'll answer any questions from that. Thank you.
Before we move on to questions, Lloyd's just going to say a few points from the City Council point of view, and then we're going to go to Councillor Udall as Chair of Licensing Committee. You've also had the opportunity to review this, and we want to make sure we're getting their feedback in. Although looking at the feedback, I think there's a lot of overlap between Licensing Committee and this committee, so this won't be the first time a lot of people in this room have discussed this.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, if I may. First of all, I was shuffling around, just handing out a summary of the discussion at Licensing Committee, but I'll leave Councillor Udall to provide a summary of that. Just 2 other points, if I may. Obviously, as a council, we are under a time pressure now to try and comply with DEFRA's timeline. So just in terms of managing members' expectations, if I may, you know, the possibility of substantially changing the action plan at this late stage is negligible. We need to get something in, and I know that seems like a bit of a rush, but we are at the mercy of DEFRA in many ways. Linked to that point, 20 or so years ago, when I was doing this sort of work, and David is also from a similar background, you could put anything you wanted to in an action plan. It didn't need to be costed, it didn't need to be approved. It could be as big as changing a road system, building a bridge, and there was no challenge. Things have significantly changed. We can only now put things in an action plan that are costed, that have political approval, that have buy-in, and that are practically deliverable. So members may look at the action plan and think, well, there's nothing big in here, there's nothing significant, but we will be measured on it, we will have to monitor it, and we will be challenged on it. So that is why what you have in front of you is a set of measures that we know we can deliver, that we know would get approval, and we know that can be funded. So just to sort of manage expectations of those points, Chair.
Thank you, Lloyd. And then Richard, if you want to just talk through some of
Yeah, just a few. The paperwork has just been circulated. I don't know if members have had an opportunity to read it all yet. Probably not. I think the first impact which the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee felt was we could have done so much more if we had cooperation from other local authorities, especially the County Council, who seem to be reluctant to actually allow us to do things which we could do, which would actually achieve a lot more. And I think we can come down to some of those things as we go down the list. We have got the issue which has been raised in concern about monitoring not just nitrogen oxide, but also monitoring particulate matter as well. And that has an issue which was raised particularly by some expert members of the Licensing and Environmental Health Committee. It's also worth saying that we did suggest that members should be able to make a request for particular areas to receive some air quality testing to see if they in their own areas, though a problem could exist. And I think that is something which we could potentially look at in the future. There was obviously mention about cars idling and how we can handle that, but I think that's maybe more to do with us in a licensing side of things, to actually try and pursue that, especially as taxes are potentially the biggest culprit. We did want to know more about the Transport on Demand scheme, which operates in Bromsgrove. I believe it has been a success in Bromsgrove, and it is hoped to be spread out wider across the county. And it's something which we may want to include, if we can, after the consultation process has been completed. The point which I was most angry about is the lack of opportunity for us to have EV charging points on the public highway. I think we will not overcome some of the significant problems we have until we can actually achieve that. And the reluctance of the County Council to enable us to do that, I think, is a tragedy. There are many other opportunities which we could do and could consider, such as a weight bridge on the city bridge, which would actually reduce some of the flow of traffic coming through the city centre, especially heavy goods vehicle traffic. That is something which would have a radical impact. But obviously that's not within our gift, and it's in the gift of another authority, and we're unlikely to get there. But I would be appreciative on behalf of my committee if we could be aware of the issues which we have raised, and maybe be aware of those when it comes to the final document after consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small note. It says that I raised active travel guides. It was school travel plans, which through Mode Shift Stars. And there was an officer at the County Council who was liaising with schools, and that post has not been filled. And then there's travel plans, business travel plans. And as far as I'm aware, there's only one business travel plan that has been started in the whole of the city. So I just wanted to clarify that note. Thank you.
Did anybody else have any other comments on this? Councillor Lewin, then Councillor Sobczyk.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm one of the members who has seen this a few times, but unfortunately I still think of things every time I look at it again. And one thing that occurred to me was reading the report. It's a very long report, but the objective that we're looking for obviously has to be achievable. And I know you've talked about it being 40, blah, 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 blah. But we're very aware that the EU are looking at 20, the WHO are looking at 10, because there's a recognition that air pollution hasn't got a safe level. But in the document, I can't really see where it says we are measuring this thing against this measure that is currently this. And I don't know whether I'm missing it. I can see it on page 5. You've got the objective 40, and then you've got a sentence that says, has been declared for exceedances of the annual mean AQO. Is it somewhere else as well? And do you reference the fact that in the future it might actually get more stringent? Are you allowed to? That's what I'm wondering. You're not allowed to at the moment, because I know that this is a very restrictive document, but how do we get across to people that, because I know that some people have said to me, oh, I've been looking at the app and it's at 39, so it's fine. And actually the perception to me is, well, 39 actually isn't fine. It's fine for this objective at the moment, but that's not really the objective that we'd be looking at in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And in terms of the Chair, sorry, in terms of the objective level of 40 micrograms per metre cubed, it's a legislative requirement. So yeah, my colleague, it is mentioned in the report or not?
The actual objective level, I think, should be
It's legislation.
in the report. It's legislation.
Yeah. We will check that before we submit it for sure as a measure. But that is the reference standard at the moment nationally. Should the goalpost be moved? Yes, they might be. But the objective is the objective level in legislation, and it would need a legislative change to do that. This report and this plan considers the objective level as it stands now, and I think part of the wider strategy work we're doing, I think that is how we will deal with potentially the future goalpost moves. I think what I wasn't clear of, and I know the discussion we had at licensing committee last time was about particulate matter should be considered. Well, that is not. That is this plan only considers nitrogen dioxides, and at the moment my consideration as you referred to, do refer to. The other thing I just bear in mind as well, be careful.
Thank you for that. I think in the executive summary, I think, because people are asking about the particulate matter, could you make that clear that we're not considering it rather than just not mentioning it? I don't know whether it does, but could we just review, just make sure that the parameters for the report are extremely clear at the very start, because otherwise I think when people look at it and say, this isn't good enough, you say, this is what we are measuring, this is what it is, and that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Sobczyk.
Thank you, Chair. Sorted that one out. Very specifically, the anti-idling awareness and regarding for taxi drivers, and several members have mentioned this. I just wonder at 5.1.22, which is on page 136, whether we could just strike the for taxi drivers out so that the action is anti-idling awareness, and it just opens the possibility that if there's any opportunities to have a greater public messaging regarding anti-idling outside schools, shops, chemists, etc., where it can be a real nuisance to people that suffer from asthma, it would give that opportunity for some action there.
Excellent, we got back. Yes, so the plan considered enforcement of anti-idling for taxis, and as we said at the last committee, the best way we thought for taxis would be to do it on an educational approach through the taxi licensing policy. That's in Appendix B for that. As part of a wider schools-related campaign, businesses, etc., I consider that as part of the wider strategy. It is mentioned as in Appendix D as one of the options of how we're going to look at the wider options, but focusing on the issues that we've got here, buses being one, for example, in certain city centre areas. The schools in the main are not located in the problematic street scene areas, so I think I would prefer to focus measures on our problem areas rather than maybe doing a citywide kind of spread, and just to try to concentrate our resources. That would be my advice, how we go about that. Just thinking resource-wise, really hard to do a campaign based on anti-idling, and we've looked at national campaigns, from London through up north, etc. And the most effective effective ways of doing that have been through working with the school in and of itself. Similar to, I suppose, similar to the travel plan sort of mindset is how do people get to the school? Which routes are they taking? What mode of travel do they take to get there? That's a much more effective way rather than the enforcement £20 fixed penalty notice. So they shouldn't be waiting there anyway and idling for. So that is why the measure we've put in was focused out about the highest mileage, the highest vehicles that are moving around the most and are going to probably, when they're stationary, going to leave their vehicles, you know, taxis. Those are the ones we want to target. And I would hope the buses we will deal with through the electronics that are built in. It's called green. It's called green roads technology. It's AI-based technology. So, yeah.
Councillor Udall, was your point in direct relation to that?
It is, and I understand exactly where you're coming from with the issue of trying to expand the idling to a wider base. But we have specifically changed our policy relating to taxi idling. And I think that it would enable us to have a measurable objective measure that we can say for our own enforcement proceedings against something which we have got legal responsibility to enforce, where we don't have that kind of responsibility to the wider community, but we do have that responsibility to taxis, and we can issue enforcement notices to them if they are failing to do their work. So I think it makes sense what the report says, because it's something we can have enforcement control over, whereas the wider community we don't. But I could be completely wrong, again, in my assessment.
Just summarising, the feedback seems to be to say the answer is no for this particular document, but yes for thinking about it as a wider piece of work. Is that a concise summary of that? Yeah. Okay. Moving on, and thank you, and Councillor Cross. I just thought that Richard was wanting to come in on that particular point.
Yep, thank you very much. Yeah, it is about idling vehicles. It's more to do with congestion and working with or persuading our county council. So any data that we can use showing how traffic congestion doesn't just impact economy but also impacts air quality. I'm particularly mindful of the hospital site where it can take people an hour to get off site at peak times in the afternoon. And I've put forward a proposal to county about some temporary peak time traffic lights that may or may not solve the problem. I mean, it's a sticking plaster because the big issue is actually we need to be not using cars not everybody having to rely on cars to get onto a congested site. So any way that we could be armed with information and data to help build a persuasive argument against other or with other authorities would be gratefully received. Thank you.
We seem to be effectively noting the contents of the report, which is what we've been asked to do. Lloyd has already said we know it's not a perfect document, but we are where we are and we need to be signing something off. We're also being asked to approve this going out to consultation. So before we do that, I just wondered whether Lloyd wanted to say something about how this consultation is going to work in practice.
Thank you, Chair. So we will follow the usual practice. I believe it's going to be a 12-week public consultation. Yeah, 3-month public consultation. So we'll do it the formal traditional routes, press releases, but we'll also use social media and the more modern routes of communication and engagement. And we'll probably also target several key stakeholders to seek their views. And what we'll try and do, it is a complicated document. We are going to provide a summary document to go out as part of sort of an easy read version to go alongside a few questions that really boil down what we're seeking, and that's whether or not people are happy with the measures that are included and are happy with the air quality action plan in totality. And again, what we will do once we've developed that, we will share that with members as part of the Wednesday briefing, so members get an early view.
Did anybody have any other points that they wanted to make? I'm not seeing anybody jumping up and down in which case I think we are noting the contents of the report, noting some of the limitations with that, but the need to move that forward. I think thanking officers for doing this piece of work. It is a hefty document that you've had to do. Are people happy to approve this going out to the public consultation? I'm particularly grateful for officers agreeing to do that summary version. I think we have to be careful about using an easy read because we'll start thinking learning disabilities that way. But it is about making sure that there is a version that is accessible to people so they don't have to read 122 pages and they can still comment on the consultation. And also we're then asked to note that a further report will be coming post the consultation to this committee. So this isn't the last time that we're going to be looking at that, and I believe that's November. Yep. Is everybody happy to proceed with the recommendation as outlined in the report? No. Yeah, okay, I'm going to take that as an approval rather than a need for a show of hands. Actually, for something like this, since not everybody is fully engaged at the meeting at this point in time, it would be useful if we could have a show of hands just to say that. Yeah, that's fine. I think that is unanimous. So thank you very much. We can. We look forward to seeing the more accessible version that will go out to consultation, along with the full 122 pages, and to receiving this back in November. Okay, I think that moves us on to any other business. He's told me anything at the start of the meeting. So what I just wanted to cover off under any other business was just to give members a sort of a bit of an outline of what's coming this year. It isn't by any means a written in stone. Karen and I are still working on what the forward plan would be, but I know it's useful for members to have a sight of what's coming, and then if you think things that are being missed, we'll be able to build those in. So I was just going to do a verbal update. So in July at the moment, and the way the other things that will be added to this, we're looking at doing a Q1 performance report, and also picking up on today's decision about looking at those refined and approving the refined performance scorecard for the year. There will be work coming forward around the biodiversity strategy and the proposals around that, and also something around the flooding strategy based on the motion that Councillor Lewin put to full council. Last one or the one before? And the other thing that's due to come to the July meeting is the 6-monthly update on the Ash Dieback report and the progress of the work around that. In the next committee we have is November 2024, and on that at the moment we've got the Q2 performance report, food waste proposals, the annual goal control report and the proposed programme around that. The air quality action plan will be coming back. You can have this in writing, you don't have to scribble it all down, it's just to give you an update. The environmental sustainability 6-month update, so Ruth coming back and telling us where they're getting to that, with hopefully some more details about the depot electrification study. In January at the moment, it gets less as we go forward because it's still a work in progress. The Q3 performance report, an annual update on allotments. We'll be back to the next 6-month Ash Dieback report and the budget. So those were the things that were formally that Karen and I had agreed in the plan going forward. We're still looking at some of the other things that need to be on there, and you will all recall that you emailed to me what you thought were the issues that you needed to put on there. And 3 main issues that a lot of the things that people emailed me out were already on the report, on the forward plan, as you can see. The 3 things that have come up today and through that feedback was looking at improved levels of recycling and contamination. That's certainly something that we need to build in. So that's something that we'll be looking at. Potentially something around street cleaning, litter and fly tipping. And then there was also something very much around the management of green and blue spaces with some very specific issues. So specific areas that have been mentioned were things around Riverside Park, the Lawnbrook Nature Reserve, Mecco Park, Offerton Lane Nature Reserve ponds, and the future of Chapter Meadows. So all of those sorts of issues that have been mentioned that we've been talking to officers about. None of these are definitely in stone where they'll turn up on the committee agenda. There's work that Karen and I as Chair and Vice Chair need to do to work this through. But I just wanted to give members an update. There was also a recommendation that we continue the work that Karen kicked off as Chair last year around the alternative use of chemicals in managing that green spaces. So those are the sorts of issues that have been raised at the moment that we're looking to build into the forward plan, a sort of oversight of the forward plan. Clearly, as we go through and we scrutinise those performance indicators, things may change. But that I thought it was useful to give people just a sort of heads up of what's coming. I know that's then useful for members as they go forward. If anybody, I don't know whether anybody wants to comment on any of that, or whether you're just happy to note that. And yeah, Andrew, I'll write it all down so you don't have to scribble it down. Okay. If people are happy with that, I'm going to close this stage of the meeting, because we're then going to go into a private session for the final item. And can I move the recommendation that people are happy with that? Yeah. Okay.